Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Budd. I'm the national chairman of the Financial Executives Networking Group, a whole hobby of mine that I've been doing for the past 25 years. I'm joined today on Chat with Matt by my wife, Peggy. Peggy was originally a speech pathologist. Over the last 10 years, she's created a career for herself in effective communication. And I've been pleased to have her join me at meetings of the Westport chapter of the Financial Executives Networking Group, where she's helped me hone materials that we can distribute to you on how to do a 90-second announcement. You'll see on the screen from time to time our names and email addresses, and please feel free to reach out to us. Just so you know, or just as by way of introduction, 90-second announcement, I want you to think of as a gateway drug. If you can't get people hooked on you, everything you say is going to be ignored. You have just a few seconds at each meeting of people to get them interested in you. And if they don't get interested in you, if their eyes glass over and they fade away, you have not achieved your goal, which is to get them into a conversation with you. The purpose of a 90-second announcement is to start a conversation. It's not a full history. I was born at an early age, not a good place to start. You have to tell them something interesting about you and get them engaged and listening. If you're at a meeting, for example, with a lot of other people, you can almost be guaranteed that everyone else in the room is thinking about what they're going to say and they're hardly listening to you. So you really have to be on your game, and it's one of the most important tools that you have in your bag of tricks to either gain new business if you're selling, or to connect with someone that might be an important business contact for you. People need a tool to introduce you to other people. The primary case is the people you are talking to are not actually going to be able to directly help you, but they know people who can. And when they call them up and introduce the idea of you to them, they need a handle and they need that brief introduction. I go to lots of business meetings. The networking group, as I mentioned, is a hobby of mine. I have a search practice, and when I introduce myself at business meetings, I just simply say, I'm Matt Budd. I find chief financial officers and controllers for middle market companies. It is so simple and so direct that when I join a group of 2 or 3 people, a few of whom might not know me, my friends oftentimes do my 10-second announcement for me. It's really the effective way that you're going to have to be to find work. Okay, so as we start out this discussion about 90-second announcements, we're going to come up with, there are 3 things that I want you to write down as they come up on the screen. Number 1, the old saw, you never get a second chance to make a good impression. I actually didn't make this one up. This is a very common thing, and I'm sure you've heard it before. The second one, which I did make up, is everything I know about you is in front of me. And if you think about it, when you're first meeting people, they don't know you. They don't know anything about you. Everything starts with the 0 second, and you're building from there. They have no base of knowledge to add the information that you're going to be giving them. So everything that they know about you is sitting right in front of them. So you have to be, again, on your game. And the third thing, which I didn't make up, Peggy did, is it's more than what you say, it's how you say it. As you build your 90-second announcement or elevator speech, what you say is, of course, very important, but it's even more important how you say it. So with that as an introduction, we're going to talk about building the raw material for your 90-second announcement. And Peggy, why don't you kick this off and discuss how they might accumulate enough material to build a 90-second announcement. Peggy?
Okay, thank you, Matt. Well, I want you to think about building this by doing what they call in school a free write. You're just going to sit down, whether it's at your computer or on a piece of paper, whatever works for you, and you're going to start to write about yourself and your accomplishments. Keep in mind while you're doing it that you should think about not job descriptions, which I see too often on resumes, and I hear too many people say, but what you need to say is, what have you accomplished that makes you unique? If you're in a room with other chief financial officers, the likelihood of is that each of you has something unique to say and something that will make you stand out. And one of those examples is going to be what might continue that conversation. After you do all of this writing, and you could have a page or you could have 5 pages, and much of that information may be used for other things. So when you start to edit, don't throw it away, just keep it. As you edit, you want to use a highlighter, whether it's your computer highlighter or print it in a real highlighter, and start to find key points that really jump out to you, that makes you who you are, makes you unique. If for example, if you are a chief financial officer, and to just say that what you do is you analyze the areas of the financial parts of the company that show their strengths and weaknesses, that doesn't make you unique. If you talk about how you do it, that you're someone who immerses yourself in all aspects of the company and listens and talks to everyone in order to analyze the financial strengths and weaknesses, now you've made yourself unique.
I think what you need to keep in mind as you're building your 90-second announcement and gathering in your raw material is that there are a lot of things that you do as a chief financial officer, as a controller, even as a speech pathologist, which is how Peggy started her career, that are ordinary course of business. Closing the books early. Everyone, if you're a CFO, is expecting you to know how to do that and to be doing it well. It's expected. But what sets you apart as a CFO is how you do your work. And you really have to give it a lot of thought. And even asking people how they think about you. There are all kinds of things that happen in outplacement, and that some are good and some are bad. But a 360-degree review is one of the tools that people often use or learn how to use, and it can be very effective in discussing with people what they know about you. People who know you, people who love you, right? They have thoughts about you, and sometimes it's helpful to ask them. One of the things I said to a group of my friends was that I was very easygoing, and they all started laughing. That I guess that's not really who I am. I'm not easygoing, but I do try to be very open to listening to other people's ideas, and it's one of the tools that I've used over my career.
And something else that people, especially in today's job market, need to be thinking about is the transferability of your skills. So as you look at a characteristic that you're going to write down that really highlights who you are, think about it as not just related to maybe what you've been doing, but other things that you may be able to do.
Yeah.
As Matt says, I'm the, example of transferring my skills. I went from public education.
Or the tired old phrase, reinvention.
So those are things that, as you're writing this collection of thoughts that highlight you for your 90-second announcement, you want to think about. And then what you want to do is you want to create bullet points, short snippets of information that you can tell people. And obviously, if you have 30 seconds, you're going to tell them a lot less than if you have 90 seconds. But you want to start finding those pieces of information that will highlight who you are and what makes you unique.
So now we've talked about how to gather in all the material. That's written, and it may read very well, but why don't you cut to talking through all of this out loud. and seeing how things sound.
Right. Remember, we said that I like to talk about it's more than what you say, it's how you say it. So, what you've done is you've come up with what you think you want to say as you read it, as you start to, and not memorize it. Please don't memorize it because then you can't be able to change things. You'll feel like you have to say exactly what you memorized.
Right.
As
So if I can just give you an example, I've chaired the Financial Executives Networking Group for 25 years, but I would never tell people it that way when I was first meeting them. I would tell them I chair a group of CFOs and controllers. Why? Because it's just too much of a mouthful, and people are not going to. It's hard to deliver. So as you're looking through your materials, and you're talking them through out loud, and you can record it on your iPhone if you want to see how it sounds,
or on
um,
Zoom.
or you can write that's the newest tool is to do a self-recording on Zoom and see how you sound. There are things that you've done that are just too big of a mouthful, but you still need to get those ideas across.
Right. And when I work with people, I find that oftentimes they create longer sentences and then they need to. So you might want to think about as you read something, oh, I could either eliminate some of those adjectives or I could reposition the way I said the sentence. So it's really a a bullet point rather than a long sentence. People can't remember that much. When you're an and when you're practicing, think about how it sounds. How does it feel in your mouth? Are you able to say it slow enough? Can you emphasize a certain word? You may find you change the words you choose. Sometimes
Or you change the order of what
yes,
you're saying because it just works better. The biggest mistake people make in trying to create a 90-second announcement is trying to get it to 90 seconds immediately. You can talk for 5 or 10 minutes if you're just talking to yourself. Hopefully, you won't bore yourself. And it's fine because honing it down, working it down, focusing on what's important is a difficult task. Uh, I think I mentioned I was in the advertising business for 10 years. I was CFO of an ad agency, but the people who earn a tremendous amount of money writing 30-second commercials, 10 seconds to bring it up, 10 seconds to bring it down. They've got 10 seconds to communicate something to you. It's quite a challenge.
it is. And if you think about word count, 50 words are going to give you 30 seconds. So think about how few words you could have if you only had 10 seconds. Not a lot of words. So you want those words to really deliver a memorable punch. You also want to make sure that those words are easy to say. So almost every word you're going to say has a synonym. If one word is harder, it's longer, sometimes you might want to change it for a simpler or shorter word that you can more easily say with clarity.
All right. So now, as you've been examining all of the material you have in front of you, I want you to focus on three important things that need to be in your 90-second announcement. Number one, uh, very important, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the first thing, is your job title. And perhaps that may or may not be a meaningful thing, uh, but your job title is important. If your job title doesn't really describe what you've been doing, come up with a different title. This is what I do. People do that all the time. What's your job? Well, I'm the president. Well, actually, the chief executive officer. Okay, so you can change this up a bit. Nobody's going to audit what you say. Okay, so number one, the role that you've played in an organization. Number two, your industry. I have a search practice, and I can tell you most jobs fall to industry. The industry that you've been in, real estate, in my case, advertising, publishing, media, it creates a context for what you're about to tell them. And what you're about to tell them last, and the most important piece, is what you do that's unique. Uh, my quick announcement at a networking meeting, as opposed to uh, from my business. My background, I tell people, my background is primarily advertising and publishing. Those are all people-related businesses, so I mention that first. I'm not a manufacturing guy. I'm media, publishing, advertising. It creates a framework for people to place the information that I'm about to tell them. And then I tell them my simple background. I simplify things. I was for a near decade. The most important thing I tell them first. I was 10 years chief financial officer of a top 50 advertising agency in New York City. And I don't tell them the name of the agency because it's a huge mouthful. And I tell them bookended around that was 2 tours in publishing. In the 1970s, I was with Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston when they were owned by CBS. And my last corporate job was with what is now Thomson Reuters. So it's really that simple. And then I tell them that in my time in the advertising business, I had Donald Trump as a client, and I collected all my money from him. Something memorable.
So, and in my case, at this point, I work across all industries. So I say something to the effect of, I'm a communication expert. And then I want to hook them in so I can either say something like, it's more than what you say, it's how you say it. And sometimes a great hook is to ask a question. Remember, we're all focusing on what we're saying. And I might say, did you know that only 7% of a message is your words? And then I stop. That gets people thinking. It makes them think, gee, what else is there? And it drives the conversation, and they're going to remember me. And I've had people come up to me later on at a meeting and say, really, only 7%? I was memorable. So that's really important.
So we're going to talk about the magic rule of threes here. And again, just to beat on that point, what you want to do is, number one, stake out your territory. What job did you hold? And number two, what industry? Okay. And then the third part, and the most important part, and that's why you kind of put it at the end, like the cup of coffee after a fine meal, because that's what you want them to remember, something memorable about yourself. One of my friends, many years ago, he was interviewing around, and he had worked at Sikorsky, and he was carrying around with him an annual report with a helicopter on it, and he became known as the helicopter guy. Okay, because that was his brand. That's how they were introducing him. Very important to keep those three elements together. Okay, and 90-second announcements. That's just a label. It can be 10, it can be 30, it can be 90.
And you never know what it was. That's why you shouldn't memorize your talk, but you need to own it. And you need to remember when you're telling who you are, what you do, and what makes you unique, remember that the listener is listening for what's in it for them. So it's not just about you, it's about what you can do for someone else. Sure. That's surely very important.
Right. So a couple of Matt's laws. One of them is I hate all abbreviations because honestly, I almost never know what they mean. So IMHO, oh, good. In my humble opinion, great. You don't want to do things like that in your 90-second announcement. No jargon. You want to be very careful that the words, the New York Times is written at an 8th grade level. Why? Because that's normal people. And in a noisy room, when you're introducing yourself and you don't have much time, you got to be very careful you're not using any industry jargon.
And what happens when you do use industry jargon, somebody is going to stop listening. They're going to start to try to figure out, what does that mean? And at that point, whatever you've said is gone. And they're listening and thinking about that. You don't want them doing anything but listening to you. 30, 60, 90 seconds, you want to grab them and have their attention.
And again, just to keep beating on this point, there has to be something memorable in your 90-second announcement, some hook that people can hang on to. After the next person starts speaking, your hook needs to remain in their memory. So you have to come up with something. And I can tell you, in talking to, 10 to 15,000 people in the last few years, there's always something that makes you unique. There was a movie, My Cousin Vinny, a forgettable movie with Marissa Tomei and I think Joe Pesci. And there was one scene where she was commenting on what he was wearing, and she said something about, and you blend. This is no time to blend. You have to stand out. You have to say something important so that people remember you. If you're just going to talk about you close the books on time, again, ordinary course of business. If you're in a networking meeting and someone has gone before you, do not latch on to what they said. Say it again. No one was listening to that poor guy who went before you anyway. So to reference something that someone else said is a big mistake. You stand alone. You need to make yourself unique.
And
Very
be
important.
right, and be able to say the same thing 3 different ways, so that if they said it the way you were going to say it, now figure out if you've created and collected and this draft of all these ideas, you'll have come up with 2 or 3 different ways to say the same thing. So again, the way you say it will have a little different shift and maybe a little different tone, and that will be what will keep them thinking that you are different and unique from the other person.
So again, you created this huge box of material, and you're probably asking yourself, well, what am I going to do with all these other pieces?
What you're going to do,
So what you're going to do with them is, once you've actually been able to engage with someone, you're going to start with your 90-second announcement piece and link it to some additional information. Perhaps you have time in that moment to add names of some familiar companies that you've worked for.
and another thing you're going to do with it is, remember we said the 90-second announcement is basically the road to a conversation. So if they ask you a question about something you say, all of that other information can be put together in a 3 to 5 sentence story
Right.
that will highlight what you do. So
Everyone loves stories.
right, and they remember stories. So you immerse yourself in the organization. They like that stood out. Okay, tell me how you do it. You're going to give them one example in 3 to 5 sentences that, going back to the rule of 3, has a beginning, middle, and end. This is what the problem was.
Right,
This
so
is what I did, and this is what the result was. And they're going to remember that story even more than your elevator pitch.
So let's clarify this magic rule of 3s. Peggy, if you want to fill everybody in, it's a common thing, right? And I've been talking in 3s. I don't know if you've noticed that, right? I gave you 3 things I wanted you to write down.
And the reason it is our brain, after getting more than 3 things, forgets everything. They don't remember part of it. And so what you
So give
want,
them some examples of
okay, so really
how we think. Magic
sure.
rule of 3s.
Okay, our lives are structured in 3s. I just said beginning, middle, and end of a story. Everything that we watch, when we read, when we're the news, they tell
Sure.
you there's a beginning, middle, and end of everything.
Past, present, and future.
Right. Our days are structured. We get up, we've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right.
We've got morning, afternoon, and evening. Now one thing that doesn't follow that is we have 4 seasons, not 3. And I somehow or another,
we only mentioned 3 of them.
somehow or another, our brain does remember that.
I
don't
try to
know
forget
why.
winter. For those
I
of you who
want to.
ski, okay, fine.
Well, if you're a skier, maybe you forget
Maybe,
summer.
yeah, exactly.
But otherwise, most of the things that we talk about, even, we have, what do you say, Larry, Curly, and Moe, is that the right
Right,
order?
the 3 Stooges.
Yeah.
Why 3? The Holy Trinity.
And children learn.
Why 3?
The
Well,
3
because 3 is the easiest thing for people to remember. And again, it's Peggy was just to repeat something Peggy mentioned is, if you think about someone holding beach balls, you throw them one, okay, no problem, they can hang on to that. You throw them 2, now they struggle just a little bit, and you throw them the 3rd one, their arms are pretty full. If you throw them a 4th ball, they drop all of them. And
Right.
that's what happens in conversations. If you give me too many things to mention, if you mention too many things to me, I forget all of them. So, as we're wrapping up here, why don't you just talk to them about the elements of communication?
Okay.
You mentioned the 7%.
All
I
right.
always tease Peggy that it really should be almost 10% because it would be easier to remember.
Okay.
But what are the other two elements?
I know it's based on research, so we won't go into that. Uh, the elements of being an effective communicator, one is you have to listen. And that means, as Matt said, don't be sitting there waiting, thinking about what you're going to say. Listen to what somebody else is saying. And as Matt and I have been modeling, build on what we say, not come up with, oh, this is what I have to say. Then there are the three elements of your oral communication. Your words are important. They're only important and remembered if your vocal communication and your nonverbal communication send the same message.
Right. So again, we've done the three. We've done the words, we've done the vocal, and we've done the nonverbal communication. Magic rule of threes.
Right. And that's so important. When you're doing your 90-second announcement, whether you're doing it on face to face or on a Zoom call, remember to look at the person. Remember to speak slowly so that they understand you and can process what you're saying. Don't remember to speak loud enough that they can hear you, but you're not yelling. And then remember to speak with passion.
Right.
Too often I heard people giving me their 90-second announcements, and every word was the same. It was measured out. First of all, people do that when they're nervous, which is why going back to practicing,
Right.
not that you're going to practice saying the same thing, but you're going to practice giving this kind of gestalt idea of who you are and what you do. And so then your nonverbal has to do with facial expressions, smiling.
There's an important thing.
Yes, it is. And maybe using your hands. I have three things to say, or gesturing. What do you think? Or this is what I want you to do, so that people start to hear your body language and how you look. Matt mentioned that before.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that they're going to remember. Actually, I don't know if you know this, but sometimes people don't remember your name. They don't remember your Matt Budd, but they're going to remember, first they're going to think about what you were wearing or how you looked, or the guy that was sitting there smiling at me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they will remember what you said. So your appearance is important. You want to look professional. You want to look together. You want to look confident. Stand up straight. If you're on the computer, sit up straight. All of that is really important because, again, it's more than what you say. It's how you say it.
Let me just bring you back to the very beginning. When you're introducing yourself to people, think about what you're asking them to do for you. You're asking them to introduce you to people they know, who they have a personal business connection with. And that's a big ask. Okay, you're not asking it directly, but you're really asking them for a huge favor. And let me tell you, if you're not enthusiastic about who you are, how are you expecting me to be enthusiastic about who you are?
Matt, why don't you expand? There's a question there from Marty. Why don't you answer that?
Sure. Being memorable. I mentioned this. I tell people two things. My background is primarily advertising and publishing. And I'd say, for those of you who have seen episodes of Mad Men, the advertising business is actually a lot worse. So, again, saying something memorable, right? And I tell them I've collected money from Donald Trump. He was one of my clients. I did a surgical wallet removal on him. Again, I came up with a phrase. I didn't say I collected all my money from him. No, I did a surgical wallet removal on him. He didn't feel a thing. He doesn't even know I got all my money from him. And that's what you need to do. You have to come up with something that is unique about yourself. I had a gentleman at one of my meetings many years ago who was an internal auditor. Now, these are not the social butterflies of the world. These are not really the exciting people of the world. But he had something that he said about himself. He said, I'm a confidence man. Well, what does that mean? Right? He said something that sparked your curiosity, and you lean in a little bit to listen to the answer. What does he mean by that? Right? Well, he said, when people deal with me, they're confident that I'm not going to do something bad to them. that I'm here as a representative of the company, but I'm not here to catch them. You know, the classic internal auditor thing, caught you on your expense report. No, he did something, he had something to say that explained the point he was making. And that's what you need to do. Hopefully that answered my question. Thank you. So we've reached the end of our 30 minutes. If you could put our contact information on the screen again, please. Thank you. Please know that I answer all of my email. If you want to write to me or you want to write to Peggy, we have a data sheet that we can send you that outlines some of the things that we've talked about today. We're here to help. I chair the networking group, the feng.org. Just go out to our website. There are videos out there. This 90-second announcement presentation, Chat with Matt, will be on our website, and our website is open to people who are not members. If you're a CFO, controller type, treasurer, or several other categories of people, I would encourage you to join. I never have enough people in our network to share their thoughts and experiences with other people who are of the same ilk. So happy to talk to you. I want to thank you for joining us on Chat with Matt. If you want to, please, I would encourage you to share the existence of this presentation on 90-second announcements with your friends. It'll be on LinkedIn, it'll be on YouTube, and it'll be on the FENG website. Peggy, did you have any final thoughts for everyone?
Well, only that your 90-second announcement and what you do is your brand, number one, and think about it going back to your advertising. It's your advertising. You are advertising you. And so you want to make sure that you highlight yourself so that somebody wants to buy you, use your skills, use your consultation, use whatever you have to offer. And they're only going to do it if they remember it and if you make it memorable. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
And in closing, I'll say one last thing. All of you are unique. There are no duplicative people. Each one of you, even if you have the same title as 25 other people in a meeting, I can assure you, if I talk to you, there's something you do that's unique about how you perform your skills. And if you want to have a conversation, contact me. Same thing with Peggy, and we'll be happy to give you some help. Thank you, and thank you for joining me on and us on Chat with Matt.
Have a good evening.